We came around this curve, had no idea what to do. We're all whitewater rafting neophytes, and we hit the rock. And when you have a boat full of engineers stuck on a rock with water rushing past it, it's very difficult to get the boat off the rock. What's even worse is when there's a second boat right behind you full of engineers from your lab, and they don't see you either, and they come in and smack into your boat. And then a third boat, and then a fourth boat, and then finally a fifth boat, all piled up on this one rock in the middle of the river. Thousands of gallons of water rushing past us every minute. And at one point, you could have literally walked from one side of the river to the other, just walking on the boats that piled up on this rock that we were at the epicenter of. Well, that didn't stop the water, obviously. But what it did was it stopped all of the upstream traffic from coming down. All the traffic, no more boats coming. That's the power that one rock in a stream standing on principle can have, regardless of what the odds are. You're never going to stop all of the water coming past you, but you can make a difference and stop the upstream traffic, and that's what we did. That's what a leader does. A leader stands on principles, stands on their values, stands up for what they know is right, doesn't give, and makes sure that if something needs to be stopped, it gets stopped, or if something needs to be advanced, it gets advanced. That story about being the rock is how I live my life. It's what I'll do in Washington.
There's almost 40 million Americans on food stamps today.
Can you speak as loudly as you can, because it's the camera will not pick it up.
Almost 40 million Americans on food stamps today.
Okay.
Being one senator, I'd like your ideas on how you approach this, being in the majority or being in the minority.
Yeah, sure. We have to look at why they're on food stamps in the first place, right? They're there because they can't afford food. Why can't they afford food? Most of them lost a job. How'd they lose a job? Well, our economy is not healthy right now. And there are a lot of reasons for that, but I think a lot of those reasons point back to government growth, government influence in the marketplace, government influence in banking and lending and mortgages, which has caused banks and other lending institutions to do things that would be unnatural for them in a regular, regular properly functioning economy. When that happens, and when banks have to do things, make decisions based on irrational behavior or irrational decision criteria, which is what the government ultimately forced them to do, then you see potential economic decline. And what we've witnessed is a huge economic decline, because we had people in homes and people buying cars and people extending their credit that shouldn't have been doing so, but the government wanted the American people to have too many things all at once. So they lowered the lending restrictions, they forced banks to do certain things, and all of a sudden when the bills came due, Americans couldn't afford them anymore, which plunged our economy into a recession, which we're still trying to claw out of, and we're likely going to go into another dip before too long because of the stability of our currency and the global economic situation. It's not healthy. That's the reason why we have so many people on food stamps. There's no simple solution. We can't just end the program, because then we're abandoning those 40 million Americans. What we can do is we can find a solution to the root cause of it, lessen the dependency on it, and help them find alternative sources for either income or food.
Follow on with Al's question here.
Yeah.
You said that right now, because of the economy and the lending and the bad practices and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's the tip of the iceberg. I don't mean to interrupt you, but that's just one of probably a dozen or so influences that cause it.
Well, typically, and right now, things are bad, but when things are good, there's still a culture of dependency.
You bet there is. Yeah.
And, how would you go about trying to get that culture, the base culture?
Great question, Roberto. That's a great question. Here's the thing. A couple weeks ago, I was looking at the proposed budget for fiscal year 2011 from President Obama, and there are 25 major spending categories in that budget. It's a record-sized budget, bigger than ever. But over the last 40 years, the federal government, understand, is charged with looking for ways to reduce its size, reduce its influence in our lives. The preamble to the to the Bill of Rights ultimately charges members of Congress with doing that. So you look at the budget through that lens and ask yourself, are they doing their job? Well, over 40 years, only 6 of those major spending categories have actually been reduced. 3 of those 6 have directly to do with national defense and keeping us safe, which is ultimately the federal government's first responsibility. 7 of those major areas weren't there 40 years ago. And all of them are entitlement programs, welfare programs, redistribution programs. The way you ultimately handle that and address the question that you asked, Roberto, is to recognize that we have these new categories, popping up that are not constitutional. We're spending money in a way that's not responsible, and we're creating that culture of dependency that we need to ultimately break ourselves from. Excuse me. If we can address those 7 spending categories and reduce them or eliminate them altogether, allowing those who ultimately partake in those who have a handout for those benefits to find an alternate source of means for those areas, then we break that culture of dependency. And I think that's something we need to do. It won't happen immediately, but certainly something we need to do. Sir.
Budgets. Well, you just hit a subject that's near and dear to my heart.
Okay. Good.
Deficit spending of 1.5 trillion.
Yeah.
Federal debt 13 trillion.
Yeah.
Unfunded liabilities 109 trillion. And $1 trillion is something the human person can't even really comprehend.
You're right. You're right.
What do we do to, first of all, balance the budget so we stop adding to these incredible numbers? Of $1.5 trillion. I mean, we're not going to cut that by, getting rid of a little bit of fraud here, a little bit of fraud there. I mean, it's a huge amount of what we're spending every year.
Right.
We need big ideas on how to stop spending and reduce the size of government and the scope of government.
Yeah.
What kind of ideas
Simple.
do you have, Dave?
How about getting rid of bureaucracies that we don't need?
Such as?
There's somebody excited in the back there. The 3 that I would start with is, first of all, the Federal Department of Education. It's a state's issue. It's not a federal issue. All right. Second one is the Federal Department of Energy. Again, not helping us certainly in this energy crisis we're in. The third one is through a chain of events, a very short chain, the IRS. It's a huge bureaucracy, but it's at the cornerstone of what is really ultimately a progressive tax system, which is not fair. It taxes, we're talking about numbers right now, right? 47% of Americans are paying taxes, 53% of Americans are not. How is that fair to either side? It's not fair to the people paying taxes. It's not fair to the people not paying taxes because they have no skin in the game. They have no stake in the future of America. There's no pride and ownership, if you will. Well, an infinitely more fair way of collecting taxes is not based on income, it's based on consumption. So if you really want to get down to the fairest way for Americans to contribute to their future, and more importantly, the fairest way for Americans to have control over their government and the amount of money going into the federal government, you base your taxes off of consumption. Get rid of income tax altogether. Okay? I'm not talking about a VAT tax. I'm talking about a consumption-based tax, which we calculate a hard line ceiling that the number does not go above. It can only go down. And then everyone has skin in the game. Right? I like to pick on Paris Hilton. She has no income. But man, does she consume. And if we were able to collect a little bit of tax money from her each year, she'd be contributing to our tax rolls as opposed to just being in Hollywood, doing whatever she does. I don't know, driving a pink Bentley. And that way then everybody has some stake in the future of America. But then on the flip side of that, if our government continues to do what it's doing and does things that we don't like, and we don't want it to grow, we don't want it to collect our tax money, we can stop spending. We can stop consuming. Because the things that we need every day, food, essentials of life, that won't be taxable. But the things that we spend discretionary income on, which we'll have a lot more of if we're not taxing our income, we wouldn't have to spend that. We wouldn't have to make those consumption decisions. And that's how you actually get control over your government. You choke it off. That's what we need to do.
So a national sales tax.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So what about the IRS, who collects it?
IRS wouldn't be necessary anymore. That's the thing.
So who collects the sales tax?
Well, there'd be a
Point of
small, it'd be at that point of sale, there'd be a small IRS. I mean, very, very small. So instead of adding 16,000 jobs to the healthcare bill, we'd be reducing the IRS down to 1,000, 2,000 people.
Well, reducing is not eliminating, because someone's gotta collect the tax, because they will cheat.
It would,
Sales tax will be 1%, people will still cheat.
but taxes that are always collected by the point of sale resource, right? The retail store or whomever, the vendor.